I grew up in Seattle, Washington, and pretty typical life. Good family, brothers, sisters. I was really big into sports, football, basketball. Those were my primary sports, and really kind of my life. That was my main focus. And then about it was my junior year going into my senior year. My family, we all moved to Texas. So from Seattle, Washington to Dallas, Texas. And it was my junior year, I got hurt in football. And so when we moved down to Texas, we moved from, rainy, cold weather to Dallas, Texas, where it was like 105 degrees, and I was in a back brace. And I wasn't able to play sports. I wasn't able to immediately get friends like I thought I would. I thought I would just have friends, right? Like, growing up in one place your whole life, you just have friends, right? There's not this experience of gaining friends or anything. You just have friends, and through sports had a lot of affiliation with people, and anyway, so I moved down to this new place that was culturally so different, and I all of a sudden was eating lunch by myself in the library, and all of a sudden I had all this extra time, and I couldn't identify myself with the athletes. I identified myself as this guy from Seattle that was into Nirvana and started getting into punk rock, and it just totally not what Texas was, and it was one of the hardest, up to that point, the hardest time in my life. I remember. Anyways, so then I started to explore other things, not drugs, and I'm just saying, like, started to explore other things, meaning like because I had this, all of a sudden I had this newfound free time, and I had no friends, and I started to get really involved in art and creating, and I started taking all of these AP art classes, whether it was art history, whether it was actually art itself, like actual, fine art, whether it's painting, illustration. And I got obsessed with it. That's all I did. And I was kind of tapping into my younger childhood of when I used to draw and color and create. And I spent this whole year creating and writing and sketching and really kind of exploring this new world. And in fact, my only scholarships coming out of high school were all to art schools. And it was the only fives on my AP tests were in art. And it was this totally different side. And so I really kind of, in that time of life where I would have probably just focused on sports and friends, it was this really big time of reflection of like, what did I like to do above and beyond sports? What did the fact that I like to create and invent and learn about certain things, and about history, and about the great, the great polymaths, of the Renaissance, from Leonardo to Michelangelo. And it was very different in a time of my life. And then I went to school saying, well, I can't do art, so I'm not going to go to any art school because you can't make money doing art. I'm going to be a businessman, and my parents will be proud of me. And so I went into economics and finance, and I appreciated that because I kind of learned how to problem solve very challenge. Like, I remember from econometrics to applied econometrics to different calculus classes, how they were never applicable in real life. And yet it allowed me to really learn how to problem solve and learn how to break problems up into smaller problems, and to then start to solve those and to put puzzles together. And I liked that. But again, going back to, well, I can't have a career in art. I can't have a career in applied econometrics. And so then I applied to go into, the coolest thing at the time was either investment banking or management consulting. And I wanted to do management consulting. That was the cool thing. That's what all the cool kids were doing. I got a couple good interviews, did okay in those. I got an offer to a management consulting firm. And during this time, I was just interning with a software company that was near our house called Intuit. And that was before software was cool, before tech was cool, all of that. We were still doing desktop software. And then we had our first child, and our first child had a bunch of issues. Multiple surgeries within, 10 surgeries within the first year of her life. But when she was born, there was some really tough things going on. And I was facing this career path of, do I want to be gone Monday through Thursday every single week? And of course, I was in my 20s. I was like, yeah, travel the world, get to meet some really great people, fast paced, 100-hour work weeks, great. And yet it just really did not overlap well with this other passion of my life, which was my wife and my new daughter. And so what's funny is then I went on to spend a lot of time at Intuit, which I'll share a bit more in a minute, but we did these things at Intuit called, journey maps or whatever. And you would map out, kind of happy, sad, or excited, or upset, or difficult, or pleasant along this period of time over your career. And everybody that did these, and as you came into a new team or you became a new leader, we had this culture of sharing out our journey. And almost everybody's Intuit was high on their chart, and mine was the lowest point in my journey, because it felt like at the time I was completely settling. I made the hard choice very early on to not pursue this management consulting sexy job that allowed me to travel and work with big companies, but to go work for this corporate America 9 to 5, surrounded by 30 and 40-year-olds who had families. And I felt like I settled. And it was kind of who knows what's going to happen. But with that said, I loved Intuit. I loved the culture. I loved the people. I loved the problems we were trying to solve. And I've shared this in a couple different venues, but I started out in corporate strategy and finance, and I think one of my first titles was business model innovation. And so I was looking at the world differently, and or Intuit differently, and I was trying to be strategic and thoughtful. And then there was a product manager, which I'd never really knew anything about, but there was this product manager that got up on the stage. And it was right after the CEO or a general manager. So it was the executives talking. And then this product manager came up and he shared this story about this customer that had this really painful personal experience. And then he went on to articulate the solution or vision that they had to solve this individual's problem, and that individual represented a larger group of people that made this problem big and important, but yet it was unsolved. And then he went on to articulate how they would solve it and his vision for changing that person's life so much so that they couldn't imagine going back to the old way. And then he talked about and showed some designs and what, kind of got clicked down into the actual experience and again, the insights and the learnings. And he had this team of engineers and designers. And I thought, oh my gosh, what is that? That's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so it was that brief moment. And then I went through the process of making the change from strategy to product management. And what I realized is product management, at least this was in my words, was product management is strategy, but with engineers. I actually get to go build the solution. I'm not going to just provide a recommendation to a solution. And that was so satisfying. And then I found myself in a place where I loved spending time with customers, and I loved the anthropology, aspect of product management. And I loved the early sketches and sitting with a customer and sketching something out and say, well, what do you think about this? And that rapid iteration. And at the time I didn't know what it was called but intuitively it made sense for me to sketch things out and to work closely with a customer on the solution once I really understood and grasped the problem. Once I really kind of felt like it was my problem, and what I had noticed in that is that my passion for solving a problem became infectious. That all of a sudden there were people around me, there were engineers, there were designers, and leaders that wanted me to go solve this problem. And then so I just started building things and started taking on different roles, bigger responsibility, and to ultimately where it. And they did this really cool thing at Intuit where there's this big coveted award, and it's called the Scott Cook Innovation Award. And Scott Cook is the kind of the best product manager in the world in my mind. I feel like he's crafted what product management is at its finest, and he created this award called the Scott Cook Innovation Award. And if you won it, you didn't get necessarily money. You did get some money. You got a trip or award. You got fame and not fortune, but you got a big poster of yourself, and it was across every campus at Intuit, and it stayed up there for a year, and everybody who knew who you were. But the biggest gift he realized that he could give was time. And so if you won the Scott Cook Innovation Award, you got 3 to 6 months to build and work on whatever you wanted. And what I decided I wanted to do was I wanted to go and build something and scale one of our products or platforms that were winning in the US and take them abroad. And so my family and I moved to London, and we were there for a couple years, and we were working at an office of 100 people. And then we went and launched the office in Paris, France. And all of a sudden QuickBooks was this brand, this new brand with zero market awareness or zero household awareness. And it felt like I was in a startup, and it felt like everything was against us except the fact that we had resources, but we were starting over, and it felt like I was part of this something very special. And after doing that, I was then asked to, after we finished what we came out to do there and it turned out being a couple of years. And when I was asked to come back to Mountain View, I just didn't want to. I wanted to keep this startup thing going. And that's when I came to New York City to join a startup called Namely, who you might be familiar with, and to lead their product and design team. And then from there, and I can go into this in more detail, but from there I joined Pendo, where now again I lead product and design and data science, and have been part of this rocket ship ride that Pendo has been on, where I'm now building a product and a platform for product managers. I'm finally building the tool that I've always wanted as a product manager to enable the practice of product, what I believe the practice of product management to be, which is to be customer backed and data driven, and intuitive, to take insights and turn them into actions. And we're on a mission to build that platform, and we're on a mission. So now I spend time all over the world with product leaders and product teams, and wrestle with them and problem solve with them about how do we help you solve your biggest problems, and then how do I take a step back and find the insights and the themes that can not only help these teams but help teams across the world trying to build better products. Scott Cook, of course, is the founder and was at for a period of time the CEO of Intuit, and he stayed around. Intuit's a 35-plus-year-old company, and he's around to this day. And I think his title is something like Chief Innovation Officer, but the reality is I look at him as the product manager for Intuit, and he's done a lot of great things, but he really taught me the principle of customer empathy and the design thinking before it was named design thinking, right? He tells the story as he was inventing Quicken, right? The genesis of all of it was him watching his wife at the kitchen table, struggling with paying the bills, and there was all this paper and this book and doing reconciliation, and it was all over the kitchen table. And he was just he was doing something in the kitchen and just stopped and watched and saw her frustration. And it was like 1983, and it was the era of technology and computers, and he thought there's got to be a better way. And after many iterations, and he showed us the original. He still has the original business documents, the business the business plans, right? The first business plans of Quicken, and he launched Quicken from that. And so that story, and then many stories that come from that, are all grounded in this idea of design thinking, and this idea of starting first with customer observations, and and kind of every time asking yourself, what is surprising me, what pain am I seeing, and noting that down, and then the ability to kind of move from observation. And not just observation in a lab or in a studio, but in their environment. And because that's where it started for him, is to go to people's environments. And we even called these things follow me homes, because in consumer tax, it was a consumer product. So you would go to people's home to watch them work on their taxes. And then going from fundamentally understanding their pain point to then moving to that place where you have ideas, right? But if you go too narrow onto one idea, you might really fall short of some true innovation and some products that really do in fact create delight. And so he embodied that. The other thing that he really taught me was this idea that when you're facing a big problem, the reality is that there is probably someone out there that has already solved that problem, but in a different context. And so I started to just become obsessed with seeking for and trying to find analogs to the problems I was looking to solve. And so I would go meet with founders and heads of product for companies that were doing something similar in a different context. And I would bring those insights back to the team as a way to continue innovation and continue thinking. And so it was this idea of really working smart, and this idea of going slow and then going fast, right? And so to be thoughtful, to spend time on the whiteboard, to look at data, and to move away from surveys and not listen to what people say they're going to do, but actually measure behaviors. And it just shaped everything. And then as I was doing that, and by the way, there's a little bit of context about Intuit as well, which is he wasn't the CEO, and we had a different CEO that came from GE. And when you come from GE, you're hyper focused on Six Sigma and lean productions, and no waste and zero defects and all of that. And we kind of, for a period of time, moved away from innovation and designing for delight, and focusing way more on perfecting these products that ended up becoming stale, and they were efficient and they had zero bugs, but who cared? And so what he tried to bring back, and it was right during the time that I joined Intuit, and where he started to really spend time with the product and strategy teams, which is coming up with how you do it. And so just me spending firsthand, just face-to-face, in-person experience with him and customers, and watching how he does that, and bringing in people from the outside to inspire us. Like, he brought in the guy that created the Apple Store, and how did they come up with that concept? Because at the time it was so fundamentally and dramatically different. And how did they? And so that just shaped me. But then Eric Ries came in with Lean Startup, and of course he didn't necessarily start the idea of Lean Startup, but as you know, but he really did a great job of articulating what it is, and giving us and providing us a vocabulary by which to talk about the idea of, hey, if we're working on something unknown, some unknown venture, we need a way of highlighting our biggest risks and testing those things first. And by the way, you could test these big assumptions without coding and wasting time. And that resonated with me so much. And so everything that I did, I took a lean startup plus design thinking approach, which is once I've narrowed in on the problem, it was about then highlighting those big assumptions that we had where things were unknown. And then, as quickly as possibly building stuff, whether it was a video or whether it was this or that, of trying to really identify and de-risk and then go into a place where when we're building with speed and agility, but also with confidence. And so I brought that to every team that I've been a part of since. And so those two guys, and Eric Ries a little bit more indirectly, I had met with him a couple of times, but it was really just studying his lectures and applying it to my own, and asking questions, and then reading his book again, and reading other authors that started to come out of that space, and just the premise of stop wasting people's time and building something that matters, and being in this era of, it's not a question now of can we build it, it's should we build it, and that just resonated with me so much. So I started to then have all these frameworks and these approaches that, as I brought to the team and led the team in that way, it brought a lot of confidence to the engineers and to the designers that we're going to do something, we're going to do it differently, and we're going to be much more successful, and we're going to learn, and we're going to become the team, the modern product team in any context. And so those, from a pure product management, of course, Marty Kagan, I've loved a lot of his writings, and but then, I go back to the great artists, the Michelangelos, right? The guys that, I think about this a lot, like the stories of Michelangelo dissecting cadavers to understanding the tissues and the fibers and the bones, so the idea of sweating those details so that he could really execute against his vision, and I love that kind of, if you're just visionary but you're not in the details, like you're gonna miss, you're gonna not execute, and so that's really shaped me. And then I think about the innovators. I just finished a book, this book about the Wright brothers and the guys that built the Brooklyn Bridge, and determination and focus and innovation and trials and challenges, and then all the way up to breaking down how Disney movies are made, and reading like Creativity Inc. and understanding how to manage creativity. Like all of these things are huge influences on how I build my team and how I look at my team as my product, and how I try to create a space of safety, but also in a place where people can innovate, but also be able to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And so all of those people and books and experiences really have shaped me over the last, 15 plus years. A lot of people talk about in product management the excitement of shipping a product. And I think that's great. Like that, it's like running a marathon. The day of the race is great. Like, and you do it and it feels good. But this is cliche, but I think this is very important, which is like, I love the game. I really do love the journey. So I just came out of a board meeting where I didn't do very good. I had to go kind of heads down on some execution stuff. Probably needed more time to think about the next year's plan. Didn't show up well, and wasn't prepared. And I can tell you, it never rattled me. It just meant I needed to get my head down and go back to work. And there was really no anxiety, not a lot of stress. I just had to do it. And so I've now, in the point in my career now, I just love getting up and kind of tackling the day. I love talking with our product managers and helping them kind of, just the call before this, just helping one of our product managers who's remote out in Seattle, just kind of take a step back and see the bigger picture. And it's really fun right now to have done product for a while where I actually know a few things, and I've experienced that, and I can have empathy, but also like kind of lead them out into a better. And so, as much as I love getting a great NPS score with great feedback, I love that. I love getting this idea that our product's helping them. I love that, but I really do like, working out a problem with our CTO, or figuring out resource allocation, or you know, getting somebody off the ledge, or providing a little bit bigger picture and clarity, and helping them kind of get back to the work and the creating and the get out of the politics. And I think that's just kind of been my evolution. I think in the earlier days, it was all about shipping something and that satisfaction, which again is still satisfying. I think we all believe in the idea of, thinking big and then kind of breaking up projects in a way that's really incremental. And so you're constantly delivering value and releasing and kind of building. And we did this, what I call a big batch project recently. And we're about 9 months into it, and we're about 3 months longer than we need it to be. And there's some regrets there. We couldn't figure out how to do it, how to break it up. We're constantly, deploying, but we couldn't. It was an all or nothing value prop, and I have regrets about those. I think any type of big batch work, even though it's critical, it's a current regret that I have right now, because what I'm starting to see is that people are starting to lose faith, and they're losing the vision a bit of where we're trying to hit, because it's never going to come, right? And that's a very recent, still palpable, but yeah, I think big batch stuff is tough. I think the other thing I would say is I've made some product decisions where I might have leaned too heavy on the data. I might have leaned too heavy on customer conversations. I might have leaned on survey results. And for solving, instead of external validation, solving for internal validation and maybe political moves where there's compromises, those always end up biting me. And then I think the other one would be, I think one of the most underrepresented challenges, or kind of least discussed challenges of being a good product manager, is being a great communicator and over communicating with the many stakeholders and communicating the vision to the engineers repeatedly and to the company. And you can't communicate enough. And I think any time that I've failed in product, it's when I wasn't communicating enough. And again, I have as many failures as I have wins, but they're all within those genres. CEO, because I don't think most of us appreciate the loneliness that they probably feel. I don't think we feel the burden that they feel. And I'm especially talking about like a CEO of a VC-backed company that is expected to perform quarter over quarter and triple revenue year after year. I just think every single employee in a company like that, if they could walk in the shoes of a CEO for a day and feel that weight, I think we would be all a little bit more patient and empathetic to when a CEO snaps or gets frustrated or yell, and I'd like that. I think it'd be fun. And then it would also help me go, yeah, like stay number two, like this idea of going to do your own startup. I know it's cool. Everybody's doing it. It's not fun. It's hard. Don't do it. So I kind of want that. There's a lot of tools out there in the market, point applications, like, you could name a list of analytics companies, product analytics companies that, measure behavior and adoption of products, et cetera. And then you have other tools like the ability to, without code, to be able to communicate and message and work and guide users in a product, right? And then there's tools out there that help you understand user sentiment through NPS and through CSAT, and then there's other so a lot of tools out there. And what we're doing, our big bet in the market right now is that these tools that I mentioned need to live together. Meaning, there's not enough to have insights with analytics. What you need is a set of tools that you can use to run experiments fast, or where you can understand paths of users and then try to manipulate that or steer that and see if that has an effect, or be able to combine qual and feedback with quant to enrich the insight and then know what next step you need to take. And so our big bet is in the world of kind of platforms and building your tech stack. We believe we are at the center of that. And the center of it includes an analytics platform that, once you install our JavaScript snippet in your SaaS product, we start recording every event. And whether you tag or not, we record it. And we can do that because costs have shrunk dramatically since Google Analytics started, and so you don't have to tag to start recording. And that's because it's really that empathy around a product manager of I might not know what I want to tag at first, but then I come across something and go, gosh, I really need to know the inside of that. I tag it, and it retroactively gives me the data back to the date of install. So a more powerful analytics platform combined then with the ability to write and deploy guides and tooltips and messaging and things to steer people in your product, whether it's to run an experiment, to fix a broken part of the UI, or just to onboard a user into your platform. But then combining that with analytics to say, my analytics will tell me what it is where I need to intercept a customer, so I can, because that if they do this, it is a leading indicator of retention and this and that. And then we also want to be able to not only record NPS in-app and through email through our platform, but we want to take that qualitative piece of feedback and we want to match it up with an analytics to say, here's somebody that scored you low and this is their behavior in the platform. And that insight is going to lead to an action and a conversation or a discussion with the team that is very helpful. And so fundamentally, our bet is that there is a few tools that need to be integrated. And then the exciting thing for me and my team is that we're now moving to what we're moving from that combination of applications to a platform where we're going to see more people being able to ride onto our platform, getting our data and insights out to more tools that are for like secondary personas, like a client success manager that needs to understand product behavior, but isn't going to go into our platform. And so, yeah, we just think we're on the cusp of kind of unleashing this platform that starts to solve, kind of in a dramatic way, many more use cases and can affect for the better that many, much more software experiences that today there's a lot of bad ones out there. So, our mission is really to improve society's experience with software, and whether that's a SaaS product or working in a bank or whatever digital software experience that you have, we want to make sure that the teams building it have all the right tools to optimize. So I'm excited about what we built. I'm excited about the problems we're trying to solve. And then I'm excited about as we start to move more as a platform and do what we do really well, but do it across all devices. So we're investing more into mobile. And so, yeah, and then personally and professionally, I'm excited because a week from tomorrow, my family and I are moving to Tel Aviv, Israel. We acquired a company out in Tel Aviv that did mobile, and so I'll continue to be the chief product officer, but also then generally manage the office out there and start to kind of connect these teams together as we scale globally and as we need to work on our mobile application and to kind of bring leadership and more innovation into that office. So I'm also personally and again professionally excited about that. Artists artists don't make money, so I'm going to be a businessman. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I don't want to be a doctor. I want to be a businessman. And my absolute kind of conviction in the world of today, because, you know, of course, software is eating the world, yada, 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 or Amazon. I like that one. Amazon's eating the world. I think that's almost more accurate. But in the world of everything's a digital experience, and then product managers are those people that decide what to build and what not to build. I believe that product management is the modern day business person, right? So the businessman of old, right? That, you know, and whatever you want to define that, a marketing business person, this, you know, whatever it is, the modern business person today, because everything is driven by technology, is the product manager. And so I'm living my dream. I'm a businessman, right? As generic as that statement is, I'm living my dream. And I fundamentally believe that we are a product-driven world, meaning word of mouth is number one, and there's no number two. You and I today, not only do we tell people about an amazing experience, we say, you gotta see this, you know, this experience, right? You got to see this new app. And so we now live in a world where the best thing is to build a business is to do it in a way that's delightful, so much so that people are going to tell their friends about it. And whether that's B2C, whether it's in the business, you know, in the B2B world, the idea is that we're the ones building that, right? We're determining what are the pain points that we want to solve. We're determining the prioritization of those. We're looking at ways to innovate and make better and apply, you know, technology in one industry and bring it to another. And so we're the modern day business people. And so I love how broad that is. And I also love that the craft itself is becoming more and more defined. And it rotates around this idea of problem solving, of creativity, right? I still draw, and I use my art passion for art and composition and you know, loveliness, you know, whatever you want to say, like, and that's not a word, and bring that into the product, right? And so I get to bring, I guess to answer the question in one line is I get to bring my whole self to work. And I love that. And I love that in fact, a lot of my buddies outside that are investment banking or whatever, they're like, you totally love what you do. I'm like, yeah, it is me. It's you know, I'm not the product guy. You're the product guy, right? But if you go to briancrofts.com, it says family guy, product guy, currently living in New York City. So, you know, I wear it on my sleeve as call it. I think the word control freak gets a bad rap, right? I like the ability to control, and the idea that I'm dependent on another organization that I don't control directly. And look, you can say, oh, but it's about influence and this and that. I totally agree, and that's what I do every day. But I don't. If I'm building my team and my team is my product and we're a high tune machine, like we're running and we're innovating, and I just don't like the fact that I don't have control, like engineering is not under me, you know, and that means that I have to share one message over here and then another message here and then a message collectively, and I'm trying to inspire and motivate, but I just don't, I like to kind of control my own destiny, so to speak, in that sense. And it just bugs me a lot. It just bugs me a lot. And I also, I think the other thing is when you know that you've prioritized correctly based on the limited or finite amount of resources, and then you have to tell a customer that we're not getting to that thing that they really want for another 6 months, is really painful. I hate it because I know they need it. I know we can build it, and I'm saying wait, and I hate it. I hate that. I hate that message. I want to say, yeah, we'll have it tomorrow. Can't do that. I hate that. Great product managers have the ability throughout the day to connect the engineers and the designers and remind them the game that we're in, the problem that we're solving, who we're solving for, and work it in a way that it's not a coat they put on, but it's a way they talk in their language. It's a way that it shows up in their passion. And again, this is the day-to-day. This is not you do this 1 week and then like there's a lot of things that, but I think great product managers going back to the point of like not being able to control. So then it's about showing up in a way where your sleeves are rolled up next to the engineer's sleeves that are rolled up, you're elbow to elbow, and you're doing your thing to either get out of the way or to help inspire or connect the dots to what they're doing is a meaningful thing. And I think that, going back to the other question about how the team, like how do you set up a team and create, I think the same thing, but on a very one-to-one basis when you're a frontline product manager working with engineers. And again, really building that relationship of trust and vision, and again, doing it in a natural way. And great product managers have the ability to do that. They also have the ability to say, I'm going to be very inclusive with this stuff, and I'm going to be very heads down over here on this stuff. And then in addition to that is always continuously communicating to the broader team and to the engineers of how you are adding value and how you're trying to make their job that much clearer. And, kind of what's this, like, if we're in this game, what's the score of that game? A good product manager is bringing new insights and not coming in and saying, we need to do this differently, but coming in and saying, I've got this new thing. It's on my mind. It's kind of bugging me. I need to share it with you, and I'd love to see what you think about it. Again, micro interactions that say, we're on the same team, we're in this together, and I can add to you a lot of value, and you're going to have confidence we're doing the right thing, and we're going to win, and we're going to help you achieve your specific outcomes or goals. And so it's as simple as it is. It's about great product managers have the ability to personally connect with each person on their team and understand what motivates them, as well as giving and providing value and serving each one of those members of the team. And again, like, it's not a fancy answer. It's the day in and day out consistency of doing that to me is the difference between good and great. Of course, there's the data-driven, customer back, yada, 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 but I'm talking about those micro interactions that are consistent on a daily basis really separate PMs. In your own life, like, what are problems that you see in your world, in your life, that you would love to fix and love to improve? We kind of start there, and we just start riffing on that idea. And then I say, well, why don't you go do that? Oh, well, no, I don't. I said, do you really want to do product management then? Because right at that point we say, well, I don't know if I can. That's the difference, right? Like, that's like going from something ambiguous to concrete in customers' hands that's solving a problem. That's product management to me. And so I always like to hear people and express not only the problems in their life, but what do they do next? And what I find is when I'm asking questions and I kind of digging deeper, either they're super interested in and have ideas, and you can action, and they want to take that action and start building something, or you kind of see a flame out in their eyes of like, well, I just want to be in tech, and I not necessarily want to be a founder, but I want to build stuff with engineers, and you kind of see them falling into this trap of, it's the cool thing now to be a product person. And so advice that I give is fundamentally, are you curious? Do you like solving problems? Are you able to influence, right? Can people feel your energy about an idea? Do people follow you? I tend to ask more questions, and maybe that turns into a form of advice. I like people to explore and to think and to be real and to have self-awareness. And but when I see that light and that excitement, then it's like, okay, let's break it down. Like, here's some really great books to read. Here's some really good books that have nothing to do with product management that are really good to read. Here's some people to follow on Twitter. Here's some Here's some, Medium blogs that I love to read. So first and foremost, like, I believe there are roles and there are positions now within product management that you can start from now within product management that you haven't built something before, right? There is now a path to start in product management. And so, again, the advice that I share with any of them, or what I'm looking for, is that natural curiosity. Are they intellectually curious? Do they want to know how things work? Do they understand the principles of empathy and defining problems? Do they have good grades, right? I think there's just certain things to validate people, to say they've got enough raw talent and creativity and intellectual capacity to take on and start to begin down the path of actually learning the craft of product management. So we're just looking for, curious people, intellectual people, people that have good personality and can work well and be flexible, and be self-aware. So you're always testing for that. You always want to listen to, what do they struggle with? What are they looking to improve? Because then I'm able to test and assess that self-awareness, that curiosity, that kind of desire to learn the craft. And I think that shows up in several ways as you dig in there. I had a guy recently that was asking for this very specific advice. And one of the things that he was able to do, and it's really amazing how it's turned out for him, but the advice that I gave, like the very tactical advice that I gave, is let's go and find an early stage startup, like, maybe pre-product market fit, pre-money, right? Pre-everything, and come in and say, I'll work for $12 an hour. I'll work for free. I need to get in the game. And again, like living in New York City, that's a bit tough. In this person's particular setup, he's married and his wife is so he's able to he has a little bit of flexibility. But what he did is he found a startup, and it was like, 3 or 4 guys in a garage, well, in an apartment, right, in New York City, but like early stage. And he did everything from playing the role of a product owner, even though he didn't realize it, to getting folks coffee, to just anything scrappy, $12 an hour, nothing. And then what we would do is him and I would meet, and I said, be sure you do this, go talk to customers, sketch this out, make sure you're getting into Jira and you're talking to engineers and understanding their flow. And so the net of it is all it is get early enough where you need people to be around to hustle and to work and to do stuff, get involved, and you can start to shape a role that starts to look and feel like a product management role. And then what he did is, and then they actually they did a pivot. They actually then sold the technology to a company, and all of a sudden he had a year and a quarter of experience that looked like an associate product manager, and now he's got a product manager job for a mobile company. What is it? It's like weather.com or something like that. So like a B2C app with funding, and they loved his experience. They loved his startup approach. So I think that was one very explicit example of just trying to figure out how to go do the work versus just showing that you're curious and you're smart and this and that, when maybe you're not coming straight out of Stanford or whatever it is. And so, because that's who we hired. We hired a lady from Carnegie Mellon that took a bunch of product management classes, and a guy from Stanford who was around technologies all day. And he went to some design thinking courses. And so he understood it. He spoke the language. He was ready to go. And a month in, they're both thriving. But this guy, he was like a tennis coach. He did this, he did that, but wanted to get into product management. And so we had to create a story, a narrative, and we had to create that experience that, a larger company would say, you're exactly what we need, a young guy was that's scrappy and startup culture and had a successful exit, and we spun it, right? But the reality is, like, he did learn stuff and he did have skills where he didn't before. Social media management, he did some tennis coaching, and now he's doing great, and he's now on a path to becoming a great PM. Number one thing that I think us as managers, myself and then my managers of other PMs, is creating that place of an environment of safety. And my kind of insights from that came from, there was a big Google study. They were like trying to find what makes up the team, right? And it's not the smartest, it's not the best engineers, it's those teams that had fostered an environment of safety, right? And this idea that I can bring up ideas, I can fail, but we're going to learn from those failures. And so it's the idea of managers creating space for innovation, creating space for creativity, and then also making sure that as a manager, your people still see you seeking out the craft. How do I get better at the craft of product management? And so the leader, the manager, the CEO, the CPO that stops talking with customers is not inspiring, right? It's not. There's a disconnect, right? And so there's absolutely a practice what I preach. Continue to evolve the craft, and you get better at the craft, but then creating that space. And so we talk a lot about that as a management team. But again, also then just giving autonomy, but also giving our managers, giving the team, the big moonshots, the big goals, but then also being able to set them up for success, right? And whether it's giving them the tools, giving them the right people, the right resources, and of course, like I said, the right environment. And so we talk a lot about that at length, because again, as I mentioned before, like, I view my team as my product, right? I run experiments with them. I collect data on them. I meet with them regularly. I observe them, right? I ask how do they want feedback, right? And it's just no different. And then I of course tell my managers to treat their product managers the same way, right? That's your product. And I think obviously there's a lot of details that can go within each one of the things I said, but those are the types of conversations that we have, and what I talk to managers about. And so I think the challenge is how do you do it at scale? But I think it's like anything, like if you would say the big vision is like a safe environment where people can fail and this and that, like, how do you start small, right? And so I think it's about, for example, like, if and I love this from Eric Ries, but like, planning ahead of time the postmortem when we know we're going to fail, because we're taking some risks and we're doing some new things. And so let's set up a meeting ahead of time where we talk about whether we kind of pivot, persevere type of language, right? Where we continue, or we say we fail, we need to move on. And so it's starting to creating operating mechanisms and starting to use language that people know you're not saying it's okay to fail. That's a very easy said than done. But if you start to take action and create kind of mechanisms around that, it'll start to speak a much louder than words. It starts to say, we know we're probably going to have some big mistakes, so let's go ahead and schedule the time. All of a sudden, that's a very small thing, but that detail has a big impact on people's psyches. It means that my manager, my leader, is actually expecting that we mess up quite a bit. But what they also expect out of us is that we're going to learn, and that we're going to talk about these things, and we're going to share them with other teams so they don't. So I think that's it. I also think actually rewarding behavior, whether it's on Slack. We have these things called Panks, where you can give people awards for being honest, like brutally honest, or with or candor. We actually award people We have a system called 15-5 where we can give at the end of the week people high fives that are public, and it talks about how that was harsh, but thank you, that was helpful. And so you can create the environment by the rewards and incentives that you have around the team. And so we literally have values that are associated with being transparent and honest and having a lot of freedom, but also a lot of responsibility. And also talking about with my team this idea that if you are on my team, you are a leader. And hopefully if you are at this company, you are at a leader. But you need to understand that. It means that how do you show up? How do you react when an engineer comes and tells you that we were woefully off on estimates and that we need to, do you get mad, or do you go to the whiteboard and roll up your sleeves? And so it's a lot of micro interactions and a lot of micro kind of mechanisms to create. But again, I think they build up over time. And then where it's really enforced is when you start to have people reflect and say, like whenever we achieve outcomes, I ask two questions. One is, did you achieve the outcome you wanted? And if they say yes, right, it's okay. And would you want to do it again with that team? And if they say absolutely, even if they failed or if they got the outcome, then I know that we're getting both the business outcome and this team outcome, this idea that this environment that we're talking about. Because you've probably been part of teams, I've been part of teams where you might get the outcome and you are heading to the door. You're going to go work on the next team because that was painful and you lost respect, and those have been tough times, right? But there's that other time where you're in the trenches and you had to storm and really come out of it, with some adversity, and you're better off, right? And I think again, starting big with the vision of a safe environment, starting small, and then scaling that over time and hopefully quickly through incentives, rewards, and the ability, and then asking those little questions and having those little interactions that can be quite meaningful on the psyche. I think they're the editors in chief, right? Meaning, if you think about like a big job to be done within the world of product management, is this idea that I'm getting inputs from all over the place, and hopefully lots of places, right? Because you're connecting with sales, with the leadership team, with your customers, with your other stakeholders. And so by nature of the role, you're getting hit in a lot of different directions. And so the responsibility of taking all of that into a set of stack ranked, prioritized priorities that match with your resources is a very challenging, a big responsibility, because those decisions impact many resources that are costly, not only from a money perspective, but just from an opportunity cost perspective. And so really nailing that and taking again, kind of using the analogy of like a newspaper or magazine editor, where they have all these stories and they have all these inputs and all these ads and all these things, and they then have to edit it down to something that is cohesive, that flows, that makes sense, that brings in the best value to the customer, that optimizes resources. And so I just think each product manager has that editor-in-chief responsibility that can weigh a lot, right? And often you're not right. And often you get new data, then you want to quickly change that list, and yet things are already in motion. And so you got to learn how to navigate that. And I just think the responsibility of effectively translating the needs of the many to a very precious set of resources is a big responsibility. So it comes with a little bit of a story. There was maybe 8 years ago, I walked into an executive team, and I was really excited about some of the work that the team did, some new insights, had a really good presentation. And I walked in with some swagger, and I felt good, I felt like I was hitting. And then I was getting these questions, and they were bad questions, and they were bad thoughts, and then there were some good thoughts. And as the meeting went on, I just started, my face, my demeanor, my posture started to, and I walked out kind of with, call it tail between my legs. I left deflated. And then I sat and thought about it and stewed. I was like, why are they talking about the color? I was disappointed, right? I was a purist. I walked in saying, I'm going to come out of this meeting with better insights and direction because this is the senior leadership team, right? And one of my mentors pulled me aside later that afternoon, and I was still kind of down, and I was honest. I was like, that was not helpful. And he said, look, here's a piece of advice. He said, I want you every meeting like that to walk in with swagger, listen to everything everybody says and say, that's a great idea. Oh, I love that. You know what? That's great. Thanks for that feedback. Walk out with swagger and then forget everything everybody said and go back to work. And to this day, I think about that in every meeting. I think the second, along those lines is don't get excited about a good meeting and don't get so beat up about a bad meeting. Meeting's a meeting. Like, there's a lot worse things. And so kind of those two things, I've shared that knowledge with other people, and is kind of funny and like almost like bad advice as that is, like, because you basically are just like, it's actually worked. And I think it's effective because the reality is you're closest to the problem. And let's think about, what is the purpose of that meeting? The purpose of that meeting is, to come up and say, I know what I'm doing. I got this under control. Thanks for the feedback. You're in good hands. Your resources are in good hands. I'm excited, and I need to go back to work. And that's the hidden agenda. Nobody talks about that, but that's what's going on. And so if you really are a purist and you struggle, now at the same time, I've also learned to, it's important to be pensive. And if I don't have an answer, don't make one up. If I need to think about it, think about it. If I don't have an answer, say, I don't know, I'll get back to you, right? And so I think just people need a lot of advice in meetings. I can tell you one, again, kind of around a story that's really stuck with me. And maybe there was maybe some arrogance earlier in my career, where I walked into a one-on-one with a senior leader, my boss, and I had nothing prepared, and I just started talking, right? And I needed to vent a little bit. And I thought, I kind of looked at him as like this friend, like I just need to come in and kind of share what's on my mind. And he kind of like paused and put his pencil down or pen down or whatever, and he's like, do you think that I walk in to our general manager's office unprepared and just shoot the breeze? And I go, no, I mean, I'm sure. I was like, I know you're like, you're a guy that you're polished. Like he's like, you just walked into my office, totally unprepared, no agenda, started shooting the breeze. He's like, do you think we're here to shoot the breeze? Or we? And so he was very direct. And again, I just felt myself breaking inside, right? And he said, even if you want to vent or that needs to be an agenda item. You need to come in and tell me, because then I know you have a plan. I know that this is important to you, so we're going to spend time doing this. But he's like, don't ever come in unprepared. He's like, it's a waste of my time. It's a waste of your time. And so that just I think, in every one-on-one sense, and whether it's the style of my manager or not, to want to be, kind of fluid and just chatty, whatever, but I have an agenda every time. And therefore, every time I join a new team and I have a new group of people I'm manning, there is here are the rules to one-on-ones, and so I've laid it all out, and I tell this story, one, because it was super painful, because it was, it's like that dream, that nightmare we all have, which is you show up to take a test and you're totally unprepared, and you're making stuff up, and I feel like those moments of lack of preparedness or preparing the wrong thing and not representing, underrepresenting, misrepresenting, um, maybe even getting into a position where you maybe have made something up, that just feels, it's just a bad thing. And I've, unfortunately, I've learned the hard way on that. So yeah, right before I was to walk up on out on a stage of like the entire, like 8,000 people, this advice from another guy. I guess I get a lot of funny advice, but he says, "Look, I've only met two other people. I've already known of two other people that have gotten fired for not doing well up on the stage. So good luck." So that advice has stayed with me, and so like any good person, I pass that on anytime any one of my guys is about to go up on stage. Um, I think. Um, like other advice, they're a bit bumper stickery, if you could say that, but they mean a lot to me, which is, and I've talked about this at length, which is, this idea of falling in love with the problem, not the solution, which is so much easier said than done, because what I have exhibited in myself and in others, as soon as they grasp the problem, they go into one solution and they narrow really quickly. And I think kind of always going back to falling in love with the problem, not the solution, means that I need to keep thinking about the solution, or I need to keep going back to the problem, saying, does this best solve it? And so that is really good advice that I share a lot. And that's kind of like one of the many maxims that I live by. I think the other one is just is like this idea of kind of always be experimenting, right? Whether it's experimenting with myself, experimenting with the team, with customers. I just think, I do believe, again, talking about that combination of art and science and craft is like, we really do in a lot of situations run the scientific method, and so to kind of follow that and to really appreciate the science of product management, there's a lot of kind of advice in there that has been super helpful for me as well. This product manager, which I didn't know what it was, got up on the stage, clearly articulated pain through real examples and stories that affected him almost personally, emotionally, very connected, and articulated the pain, and then went on to describe the solution, the vision, not the solution, the vision for how we would solve that problem based on that, right? Again, in any audience, right? Whether it's at the company level, it's among engineers, it's what the product team is. Can I convey the mission, the challenge? Can I then convey a vision that is inspiring and that is influential, in so much that it inspires people to act and take action? And I think that's the bar. On the first day, first week, I really think of that as a time for those new team members to invest in the relationships, right? So getting to know all of the people, if they're a PM, if they're a manager, obviously spending time with their direct reports, and then their, as well as their peers, but really just getting interested to know the team. And then, both the, as a product manager, you have multiple teams, right? So whether it's the product team itself, whether it's the engineering team or Scrum team they'll be working on, some of the key people in the organization. So I think it's very much like, let me kind of get information. Let me kind of understand what's on people, like top of mind, like what's working well, what's not, like what are you inspired about? And so I think kind of that kind of being brand new, it's going to be hard to grok all of the maybe technical challenges or the product decisions or all the intricacies of that go into that. But you can start with something that you do know and understand, which is people and where they're coming from and their perspectives on things. So I think that's such a great way to spend the first week. And then I think as I used to always say, like, get in front of customers as soon as you can. But I think there's this period of like, if I can understand a little bit of the context, then I might be able to, when I then go to engage customers, I can ask maybe a little bit better questions, or be a little bit more aware or have a bit more context. So I would say, within that first month, obviously the first few days, first week or so are really focused on the relationships. Then it starts to move to really understanding the customers and kind of where we're at with in terms of our relationship with a customer. Again, kind of the same questions like what's top of mind, what's working well, what's not. And again, really just kind of that, that one time, that brief opportunity that you have that you never get back as a product manager. You never get that time back to be able to just clean slate, fresh eyes. And what I always encourage new PMs as they're joining is like, look, don't underestimate, especially if they're a younger PM, it's like, don't underestimate your observations and your insights that you're going to have in the first month, because you're coming in with fresh eyes. You don't necessarily have those biases that we've developed over the years that we've been working here. And so bring a journal, take notes every day, reflect on what's going on, whether it was when you're working with a customer or talking with an engineer. But that first kind of 30, 60, 90 days really represent a great opportunity for you to both learn, bring in a fresh perspective. And then as you start to accumulate some wealth and some knowledge in how things work, to really try to understand what are the things that they can do, like little wins, things that, they can ship their first feature or do their, go in a little bit and play a quality role for a little bit, but like get into the details and understand how we ship product, or how we start to make decisions, or how you work with your design team. And but if somebody does that in the first month or 60 days, that feels pretty good, and obviously a use of time that you can't always get back. So what we've done is we've been very clear on we have 5 core product management core jobs to be done, and we talk about those jobs to be done frequently. And our roadmap has swim lanes against those. And we also have another kind of lens of like the other parts that kind of feed multiple jobs, that are layers that need to exist, that, extend beyond just one job, and they're interrelated, and there's a lot of connective tissue and all of that. But one of the things that not only that we do, like outside of our product, because we're working to productize this, is we're measuring something called time. We're doing something called time to benefit, and it's cohort analytics. I call it time to pi, which has some story behind it, but it's like time to pi, like how much time does it take me to get pi, and to get to that pi, and so that payoff, that benefit. And the idea is what we're building, and ultimately it'll be for everybody to measure, is this idea of, I have goals. When somebody new comes into my product, there is a certain job to be done, and we want to measure the efficiency of how long it takes, how much can, over time with every new cohort, reduce that amount of time to benefit for every new person that onboards. And so not only do we measure that as a KPI, but we're looking to productize it obviously for others to do that. What right now it requires you to do, is not everybody does, is understand what are your leading indicators, what are the things that lead to the benefit, or what are the things that actually are the benefit. And sometimes people think it's this, and when you look at the jobs to be done framework, it's actually this. And so again, first getting that clarity on what it is you're actually, like why people are actually hiring your product, and then measuring the time it takes to get that, and to then reduce that is obviously, it's very data driven, but again, like there's so many technology applications, and I think it's to help you with that. And then it's just really breaking the frame of thinking, in order for my software to be big, I need you to log into my software to get something out. It's like, that just feels old. That feels like three steps too many. And so it's a goal of ours. It's a big goal, but we think that's, ultimately really important. Going back to the, once you install our JavaScript stuff, we record every action that they take. And so one of the you have to make you have to make some assumptions. So for example, if the job to be done is I upload a document and then hit submit because that saves me time to do this and that, then that when it shows that somebody has uploaded a document and hit submit, we know that that's a little bit of a triangulation that we have to do to say they've done all of these steps by way of behavior, by way of a path, and therefore they've done it. And so we could say they've if we know that's the job to be done and then they've done it, then we know they've benefited from it. So for example, when I was at QuickBooks, the time to pie or the pie or the carrot was they're small business owners where cash flow is their oxygen. It's what they need to survive as a small business. The thing that they wanted to see as soon as possible, without any friction and with the highest degree of accuracy, not precision, but accuracy, is my first snapshot at a P&L. And so what we would work on, whether it was more integrations with banks, whether it was the first use experience of understanding and knowing more about your business and doing it in a way that we could reducing that time to that first look into your P&L. Right. And so, like, again, from how we would measure it from analytics perspective is what's that point in time where you've linked your banks, because we could see that in the data. And then to the point where you hit compile P&L or whatever, and then you see it. Like, we would measure that. Right. And then the idea is, okay, for that month cohort of those customers, for new customers, it took, 12 minutes and 30 seconds. Do we get to 11 minutes? Do we get to 10 minutes, et cetera? It's not perfect, but it's enough to say we feel like we're improving. Mint.com. So similar to like QuickBooks, it was measuring how long does it take for you to get a snapshot of how you spend your money in that pie chart. That nobody had that back in the day. Now everybody does, every bank, every credit card. But back then, like, getting to that breakdown of I spend this much money in food, this much money in this, that people are like, whoa, like, because you're aggregating all of your information. It's the first time people had that snapshot. So they dubbed it time to pie, and I've just carried that. And it kind of sounds like, I love some pies, but not all pies, but like, it's like, oh, time to cake, right? Time to pie. Like, but it actually is time to the pie chart. I have like a kind of this arc that I describe, and in the arc, there's a line that's kind of like a flat line. So like the arc goes like this, like you start here, and the arc that I want people to go on is in this journey, in this process, is to get to an amazing product, right? And then there's this line that just goes straight, but it stops way short of this one over here, and it says expected refinements. And so my process that I kind of, so that's is it goes like this. The arc at the top of the arc is insights, right? And so the way our process works, and I'm talking maybe more about the point at which we start to build. I'll kind of go up to that point, from like inception to like when we start to build. But before we build, the idea is like, how do we get information, inspiration, empathy, whatever it is, in order to form an insight? And so what that means in terms of process is, again, not too different from what we talked about in terms of engaging with customers in a variety of ways. And we could talk a lot about that, from doing stuff that I've done before, like doing an apprenticeship, like actually walking in the shoes of customers, to in-depth interviews, to observations. Like, again, the list it can be rather long. Data, analytics, all of that kind of gets into that space of an insight. And again, what is an insight? It's sometimes it can be hard to find, but it's that aha moment. It's the light bulb going off. It's the thing that inspires you to want to take action. And so that's the top of the arc. And then as you move, and one of the, again, going to the process part of it, is one of the, I think the most commonly, like, if you're doing all that good stuff, the thing that teams fail at, even if they're doing all that good stuff, is they don't debrief, right? So again, there's this idea of like going out and getting the data, getting the information, getting the inspiration. And it can be a very individual thing. And then everybody goes back to work. And I think the most powerful part of that is often missed is that moment right after you've, let's say, gone out and observed a customer, to come together and to debrief and to hear each other talk and to hear the words they're using and to hear the stories they're telling, to ultimately pull out what is the pain that you saw and what are the things that surprised you. And by taking that lens, it's that thing that leads to that insight. So my process is one of, how do I help people get better insights, rich insights? And then from there, again, that being at the top of kind of the apex, the thing that I would say is the difference between expected refinements and something amazing is the level of insights that I think is a lost art, and we don't talk about it enough. Then from there, it's about forming the vision, right? It's like fundamentally, how do we believe we could solve this problem, a problem that we really now understand? And the process there is, again, not narrowing too quickly, but staying broad on 7, 8 ideas, narrowing, and then going broad again, right? This idea of really fighting that urgency or that desire or tendency to narrow too quickly. And then it's about, again, kind of going to that space of like, okay, now we want to, there's some uncertainty if these are the right things to solve. And so then it's about, how do we do, run experiments, but not just experiments, also just bringing customers into the office or going and doing the rapid iteration, rapid prototyping, bringing them into the solution space with us as they understand the problem as well as we do. And then going to then actually getting to that place where there's more fidelity in the thinking, there are clear direction in terms of the way we want the user experience to be, there's higher fidelity in the designs, and again, and then we go into production. Now, who's involved in that? Everybody, right? It's not efficient to bring everybody to everything all the time, but if engineers are not brought in the beginning, then it's going to mess things up later, or it's going to be less optimal, or you're going to fall short. You're not going to get as far as you could have if you create a certain level of excitement, empathy, passion for what you're about to work on. So going back to what I was saying about a great PM lets the engineer and the teams know what game are we playing and what's the score, and keeping them, and then you go into some classic product development. And I say classic, but I guess it's somewhat more modern. But we do 2-week sprints. We follow an agile process. I still wonder if where the next evolution of that is, if we want to, especially in the B2B world, it's different from B2C. Expectations are different. And so then we go into that whole world, which I can share. But again, I feel like that part, obviously, there's a lot of execution risks once you get to that part. But the bigger thing for me has always been, are we working on the right stuff, right? And do we know that with conviction? And do we know that it's a big problem that hasn't been solved, and that it's going to create differentiation in the market, and that it's going to help us monetize and grow as a business to be able to solve bigger problems? And I think we live in a really noisy world. I think ever since Google ruined kind of the office space, we're distracted. It's really loud. It's really noisy. And what I really talk a lot about my teams, and again, not just creating an environment of safety, an environment of where creativity is rewarded and all that stuff, but it's also just creating a space to think and take. I always tell my team, you need to take time to think, and you need to carve out space to think, and not just by yourself, but with others and with yourself. And I have the luxury of, I work in New York City, or live in New York City, and the team is in North Carolina. And I go down there, every week for a couple of days, but I then get to come back here and I spend time thinking, and I have whiteboards, and and I write and I might sketch stuff out, all the things that we talked about. By the way, I love my iPad and pencil, right? Like it finally can digitize all that stuff that I used to have to take pictures of and then upload it to Jira. All that stuff. Anyway, but it's I think PMs, it's too easy to get in the rat race and not carve out the time to think. And I think we are paid to think and problem solve and look at data and to question and to prove ourselves wrong. And if we're just herding cats and running the process, then we're only as good as, I think it kind of goes back to that expected refinements area versus, amazing product. And so, creating that environment super hard. My biggest pain point in context to the fact that it's what I said, just totally different. Other side of it is being in New York away from the team. Right. And so, if the product is the heart of your company, which we believe it is in our company, and then the person that's responsible for creating it is remote, it's tough. It's tough on the team. It's tough on me. It's tough on the executive team. And so just personally, that is a huge challenge. And I have to constantly experiment and try different things to make sure that I'm communicating effectively, I'm giving enough vision, enough direction, where it used to be just kind of in the hallway or in person, and doing it through my computer is always, less efficient. And so it means I have to fly down there every week, and it's just challenging at a very practical level. That's with a growing family, and it's just a practically challenging thing to do. And then because I spend so much time doing that, it leaves me less time to go spend time with customers. And so it's a compounding effect. But and so ultimately after Israel, I'll probably move down there because it's just getting hard. As we scale more and more, it's just getting harder to do my job, frankly. So number one, we only do video calls. Which again stinks. It means I'm talking to like this. Like I do this like all day long, right? So we do that. We have very, very heavy on Slack. I make sure I participate as much as I can, just whether to share a story, send a picture of where I'm at. So my team will follow me on Instagram, right? It's just trying to create some personal connection that's a little bit more scalable. But to be honest, like I just am so far from figuring out how to do it really effectively. I think I am dabbling at solving the problem versus like, because it's a very human, personal thing, which is like, how do I replicate me being there? Like we even thought about buying one of those iPads that are on those wheels, just like as goofy as that is, but just to like be like, I am a person, I'm here, guys, I'm here. And then as a company, like I was the first employee that they hired that was remote. And so it's just, it's just a centralized culture. Now it's getting bigger, and, we've got New York and California and Israel, and we're expanding to London. And so we're going to get better at, as a company, they're engineer, like it's by trade, it's by personality, it's by like, name it. It's the, we as product managers are looking for that right balance of, business value, customer value, and the technology. And that mix is, obviously it can often be less appreciated by an engineer, and obviously that can lead to frustration. And so I think anytime there's a disconnect there, that's frustrating. I think also, we have different incentives, you know what I mean? And so where I might get passionate and excited about the craft of product management or whatever, the engineer might be solving for something totally different. And what I have found working with engineers is that although there are very common characteristics, they are so like any human, they're all very unique. And I've always found it somewhat difficult, always a goal of mine, and yet much more difficult than me relating with a PM, of trying to find the things that really drive them, because it's so different. And then, yeah, I just think anytime we're misaligned on the ultimate business goal can be really frustrating, even when you think you might have repeated it 100 times, and then seeing that disconnect be still, be pervasive, like, is obviously very frustrating. And then I think, art is, and look, a lot of the frustration comes from our own kind of, idiosyncrasies and things that we're solving for. And sometimes they can just be at odds. But I've also found that it can be a nice check and balance. On the flip side, I love engineers that will take the time to explain things, and the PM, with enough humility to say, I don't understand this. I'm not going to fake it. I'm going to just say, I don't understand. Can you explain it to me? And so, on the flip side, I love it when engineers will take the time to explain it because they understand the value of that, versus when an engineer is flippant and maybe doesn't want to and believes you should already understand it and is impatient with you not understanding it. So I think that all those things can be frustrating, but it's probably not too different from working with any other group. Like, I'm on the C team, so we are the executives, right? So everybody there is my peer, and I frankly just get a kick out of working with them. I fail when I am not communicating. We all fail collectively and individually, where when each of us cannot describe the strategy and the outcomes and the plans that each other department has. And so I think, the challenge is always, how do I carve out enough time and spend enough time so that not only do I understand what they're solving for, but how what I'm doing both helps them and how what they're doing helps me. So it's very symbiotic, and that we're all very much aligned and have that shared vision and that same kind of desire to win, and win in the right way. And so I'm just lucky enough to be part of a C team that, kind of going back to the, just enjoying the journey because of them as well as my team. So, but it's always a challenge to make sure that as as you focus on your org and as you're on your priorities and your vision and your strategy, to continually make sure that they're updated and we're singing from the same talk track. And so I find a lot of challenge in just in that dynamic, and yet one that we all are striving to be really good at. 100% the team. Like, I am a big believer in happy employees, and not like happy employees like in terms of, like we play a lot of ping pong and have a good time socially. It's that I've talked about, I want my biggest response, like the responsibility I put on myself is one of legacy, meaning I want them, no matter where they go from here, and some of them will be really successful, no matter where they go, I want them to say and look back and be like, that was the best team I ever worked on, and that was some of the best work I ever did on my life. That, to me, like, that's a big responsibility that I take on, but it shapes what I do every day. And so, so what I seek to understand from every single product manager, designer, data scientist on my team is, and I go through an exercise with them, is what are your hygiene factors, and then what are your motivators? And hygiene factors, right, are things, the way I define that and the way it's been defined in the world is the things that if not met, cause you to be frustrated and dissatisfied and upset. But when they're met, it doesn't make you any happier, right? So you can only mess those up, right? Or you can only, so you gotta, and everybody's hygiene factors are slightly different. Title might be really important to somebody. It's just a hygiene factor. It's not a motivating factor, but if you have it wrong, it hurts them and it distracts them. And then understanding what are the motivating factors for each of the individuals, because then you can not only tailor what they work on, what project, but also how they tick, right? Some of them just frankly say, look, I'm not in it for this or that. I just want to be validated that I'm really good at my job. And so and then that's actually very motivating for them. So so I take that approach. Then my biggest responsibility is one of legacy, and one of they look back and say that was a great time. And not only did we achieve the business outcomes, but we want to do it again with each other, and we would do it again with that group. Lightning in a bottle. Well, I can tell you the last thing that we iterated just recently, the most recent thing was trying to better understand at an executive level about, in the absence of a true PMO or project management, team, is trying to understand, again, like I talked about those executive level metrics, like what are the right level and right metrics from an engineering and product perspective to bring into the executive meeting. And that's required a change in process, as well as, and the way I think about it, that kind of one click up is, are we getting better or worse at our predictability of delivery? Not better at, just guessing and hitting but better at predicting, more accurate in terms of what we think we'll hit. And so we just started going through this process, and we're getting trained on it now. And it's actually relatively new to me, but it's getting into the world of PI planning. And so PI planning is really about trying to be more prepared, more thoughtful for the future. Obviously still agile, but having these 1 or 2 day events where not only you get shared vision and commitment, but there's a overarching or a broader understanding of the dependencies and the goals and the things like that. So all of that, of course, to help us get ahead and be proactive versus reactive, but still agile and taking new data in and reacting to that, but being a little bit more ahead of it. And then also, so again, to kind of create more room for innovation and a little bit more kind of harmony, right? But then also just to be able to ultimately be more accurate with our estimates and delivery, because they have business impacts. And so that's, we're going pretty deep into that right now. And that's probably the biggest thing we're working on, or the most recent thing. I want to see, and again, my bias, but I just want to see more creativity. Again, I would recommend any product manager and product management leaders to read Creativity Inc. It's the best management book I've ever read. And why? Because the idea and the art of managing creativity, which I think in other words is, how do you create an environment and manage good problem solving, is something to spend a lot of time on. And it involves all the things that I talked about in terms of really good communication, storytelling, empathy of the problem, an understanding of the problem, and then doing it in a collaborative way where people can provide you feedback and be involved, and then you have that right to either ignore or to take or to build upon. And so just really, I'm actually speaking about this next week up in Canada, but this idea, kind of breaking down how Disney and Pixar create epic movie after epic movie. There is a process to it, and there is a craft to it. And I want people to think about their jobs much bigger than what they might think and perceive it as today. It is an art form. It is a craft. And there's nothing I appreciate more, no matter what industry or what field you're in, when somebody understands their craft and they look to master it. And I really look to outside of software development as inspiration to, again, teams and other industries that do it so well. And I think Pixar, is one of those. And I've just become so, when I read it, and I've just become, I've had multiple copies of it, and I've given away a copy of it with my notes in it as a gift to somebody, because we were really kind of, really jamming and riffing on these principles. And so then I've had to buy it again and redo the notes. But every time I go through it, I'm inspired to build a better team, to create operating mechanisms that, like Disney, as they bring out storyboards and tell this story, I want to elevate the craft of PM by understanding the significance, the importance, and the dramatic and profound impact that they can have on people's lives in a very positive way. And so I would just leave it with that, right? It's like, go explore that, and I think more people will be inspired and will love their job that much more. At the macro level, it's this idea that product management is becoming it's becoming understood in terms of its importance, right? So I think one of the things, like working in Silicon Valley most of my career, is you think every company is being led by this great product management and design and engineering team, and then you like, now, since I work with kind of product teams at scale across the world in the US, you realize, oh wow, like that was maybe more the exception than the rule. And so just kind of seeing how companies and teams and executives are starting to appreciate at kind of probably untold levels in comparison to years past, the appreciation for a good product leader, and how difficult it is, how challenging of a job it really is, and how much of an effect it has on the future of the product, decisions, resource allocation, investment. And so I just love that macro trend of, like, it's really being recognized and it's really coming to its own, right? As much as hopefully someday as well known and as well established as marketing function. So that's a great trend for all of us guys that are really into and have believed in it for a long time. I think that's one. I think the second is, and maybe kind of a click down from that, is, and it's going to a little bit of kind of the role that I play in the ecosystem, which is this idea that data is insights from analytics and qual, like, are so much more pervasive and available and at scale than when we used to kind of hack together. Like Kissmetrics came out, and obviously Google Analytics was before that. It was like you had to really understand what you were doing, and we messed it up more times than not, and data didn't tie. And so I appreciate what we have now, because I've seen just the evolution over time. And so now we're at scale, a bit more at scale in terms of the access to information and data about how people use our product. And so I love that trend of I think empathy and being customer backed has been really embraced by a lot of teams. Design thinking is, if it's not practiced, it's definitely sought after. And I think the idea of being more data driven and seeking to better understand and consume analytics, and to have product metrics show up in executive dashboards is another really great trend that I'm seeing. I think what we're starting to see a little bit is there used to be a little bit clearer lines between product and design and user research, and a little bit more tangible role descriptions. And I think what we're starting to see is, as product managers are becoming more savvy, and I'm sure you believe in kind of that T-shaped product management, right? Which is like, strong breadth, right? Whether it's business acumen, technology, but then you have something you're really deep in, right? Whether it's you come from computer science and you're a technologist, or what I'm starting to see more and more is product people coming in with strong emphasis on design and understanding user experience and understanding the need to go be with customers and create that empathy. And so you're starting to see the convergence of some of these roles, right? Where, like, user research, what is that if we're the PM team outrunning experiments? And if we're outrunning experiments, who's really feeding the design requirements? And so I think the lines are, so that trend is turning into some blurred lines. And so I think where some people get frustrated by it, and I think it causes a little bit of like, who's on first, who's doing what, I think what it's doing is just raising the game. I think, again, like, product managers having now abilities to do what, so for example, back in the day, you were reliant on an engineer to get analytics. You were reliant on an engineer to do a modal or an onboarding, flow. you are reliant on designers to do early prototypes and sketches and thinking. And now, speaking of our platform and others, we can do all that. So the product manager has been trained. It's again a role now at scale or getting closer to scale, and so we have more skills and we have more tools. And so I think that is a trend that's causing some of that, maybe not necessarily contention, but a little bit of misunderstanding about who does what. And so even in our team, we've kind of come out with this table that says there's these primary and secondary drivers, or there's drivers and then heavy contributors. And there are times where a product manager is going to drive something and a designer is going to be a secondary person on that and be very, very much part of that, but they're not leading it, and so we're trying to embrace and we're trying to define what this modern team looks like. And for us, the modern team also brings in data science. And so it's kind of phasing out some of the old, drawing a little bit, kind of some newer, crisper lines going forward, kind of everybody being challenged to do better and getting more technical and kind of elevating their craft, as well as bringing in more of the data science into that modern product team. So, all of those things are starting to converge. I think it's very positive, but it's causing teams to pause and talk about it and work things out. And if it goes unsaid, it leads into frustration, stepping on of toes, redundancy, lack of communication, frustration, all of that. So I think that's something to watch out for, but I ultimately see it as a thing that's positive. Bigger picture, I think product managers need to get better at really understanding and defining the jobs to be done, like the why people are hiring the product. And then, and I think that's a skill, and I think it takes time. And then I think it's about how do you reduce the friction as much as, like, with all the tools and capabilities and technology. So call it, AI, ML, call it whatever you want, right? These are just some new technologies that, that will continue to become more prevalent and understood. But to me, they serve one purpose, which is to help us get more and more efficient and reduce friction between the time somebody hires a product and they're able to get the job done. And so, I think about, for example, like if I'm creating a modern HR platform, which I was building an HR platform, but I wouldn't say it was modern. To me, the modern HR platform is, look, I have questions, right? I have questions about how much time off do I have? How much time have I accrued? What's the next holiday that's coming up? How much money, like what are my deductions? What do they look like? What's the policy for this? What's our CEO's vision of XYZ? And to me, it's just a series of questions and answers. And today I have to go to a myriad of tools and I have to log in and I have to navigate. And yet all I want is an answer. And so to me, the future, like the skills is how do so to me, the solution, just really quickly on that is, again, one more layer to that, which is if you're solving for an employee who has questions and needs answers to whether it's HR related or not, where does the modern employee in a tech company, for example, spend their time? They're in Slack. And so why do I need to create a different interface to get the answers? And so again, without talking about AI bots and technology and all this stuff, it's like, I don't care what it is. It's how do I get better at understanding the latest technology that's going to aid me in reducing friction there's a lot of traditional things out there, and you need to eliminate all of that to reduce that friction to get people to the benefit sooner. Because I think in this world that we're living in, where we're, good or bad, but we're stimulated all the time, we have access like this, and this. The software experiences out in the world that product managers are creating that have one or two extra steps of friction will fall by the wayside. And so if you want to build something that's sustainable and help solve jobs to be done and problems, it's got to be frictionless and it's got to be efficient. It's got to be now, and it's got to be in context and relevant to whatever platform they operate in on a day-to-day basis. Look, I see it as there are sophisticated PMs and there are unsophisticated PMs. And what I want over the next 5 to 10 years is that we have that shift to more sophisticated PMs. And what does that mean? It means that there are better tools that align better with the craft of product management, so that we can help more product managers, not only us, but just that the trend is that people know, like I look at it like this, to kind of back up a minute. Back in the day, before marketing automation, people knew some things to measure, but not everything. And they didn't necessarily know what questions to ask. They knew some questions, but not all of them. A lot of it had to do with efficiency of spend and this and attribution and I feel like that's where we're at with product management, which is it's a thing. We know we need to be data driven, but I think there's still a lot of PMs that don't know what questions to ask. And so I think it's very much the same journey that product management is going on, that marketing did back in the days of, when Marketo and HubSpot, when they were all like, they were helping people, Insight Squared, like they're helping people ask the right questions. And then it became a thing where it was at scale, and everybody knows you need to measure these things. And I think what I would love to see in the next 5 or 10 years is that every board slide has 2 or 3 slides in it with metrics that they're used to seeing, and that board members or other executives know what to ask about. Like, I want them to ask more about NPS, but not just what the score is. What's the score of the persona that you're serving or solving for? And then not only that, but like, how do you tie it to the behavior? And do you see any misalignments? And then not only that, but what are how are you leveraging your promoters? And then from there, it's like, okay, well, what about, is your product becoming more efficient by way of onboarding and by way of time to buy? And, what are your in product, not your attrition numbers, but in product retention? And then also, you just launched this new product. What does adoption look like? And did the initial spike, did it stay steady? Did it grow? Did it fall after the initial mark? Like, these are the questions that I've been asking myself for years, but they still don't show up in the Looker dashboard. They do at our company, but they don't in most companies. And my goal is that and the way I just kind of keep it short is getting kind of that 10% of sophisticated PMs. I want it to be 60%. And it shows up in a lot of different ways, but again, it's so critical as again, everything becomes digital. And these are the people in the company, going back to the other part of that, have the responsibility to make resource allocation, prioritization decisions, to know what we should do and when and why and all that. I thought every PM was the quarterback of the company. Like, I thought they're the ones on stage, they're the quarterback. And turns out they're not the quarterback everywhere. And they haven't necessarily earned the right to be the quarterback per se. And so the role, again, is like, instead of maybe, when I think about B2B SaaS, I think about, at the end of the day, it's the head of sales, it's the head of product. You know what I mean? And that's the way I see it. And then there's a bunch of enablers and all that stuff. And so the way I see it evolving is that same kind of view of the world that we have is extended across all good companies, which is the product person, product people becoming CEOs. I see product people being the right-hand person to CEOs. And I just see them as, again, the future leaders of business. And so the role is going to be more sophisticated. It's going to get higher profile. I think we're going to start to see, we already start to see different categorizations of PM, with a technical PM or the growth PM or just a PM or whatever. And so I think, just like, again, we've seen in marketing and others, there's going to be new roles carved out as other older roles elevate. and older roles die off. So I kind of see that evolving and morphing. But who knows? I hope it keeps trending in that direction. For as you and I are product guys, I hope that continues that direction. It'll keep us employed for a while. But I see it. I see it. I think there's. I feel like there's fundamentals in the process, right? So, like in the 5 and 10 years, like as five, I just see more teams getting better at it as the craft continues to get defined, and more successful teams are talking about the methodologies and the fundamentals that they used. And so my only, I guess again, my only difference I would say is bringing in, like, into the process, the idea of data science and data scientists as part of the product team. And as you do that, it changes the process a bit. And so, like, for us in our world, what we do is we use, and again, maybe data science, I don't know, I feel like data science is applicable in so many places, but for us, we leverage our data science team to dog food data and analytics and insights way before we productize it, right? So there's this notion of, like, dog fooding and experimenting that just feels a little bit different when you're doing it. It's basically, the way I look at it is, we do stuff very manually, and we do it manually until we're like, this is solving a really, really big problem. And so I just feel like that's different for me over the last, and again, it might be related to my like what I'm doing, but like, we didn't do that 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. It wasn't part of the process. What we did was much more what I described, the process of empathy and rapid, experimentation, and going broad and before narrowing, and things like that, right? Like, we always have been doing that, but the idea of data science, I feel like it's the next, it's the modern product team, and therefore, if there are new players in the modern product team, and now players that don't exist in the modern product team that used to, then the flow changes a bit. And I don't know, I mean, I could probably, like, diagram it out maybe, but I just feel like those kind of, the who's on the team is really going to start shaping the process a bit, mixed with the core fundamentals that I'm just hoping people get better and better at over time. Like Slack, for example, it really fails us. And it also is really, really helpful. I miss out on so many conversations because of Slack. But yet I have access, and there's a certain amount of efficiency that I love. And so that's kind of the nature of my answer, which is, I think there's a lot of tools out there that both get in the way. I think it's more and more comfortable for us to just stay in our offices. And so call that tools, call that environment, process, or whatever. But and then there's technology that's made things so easy that I so totally sound like the old guy when I'm talking about this stuff. But what I just hope with some of these tools is it just doesn't take away from some of the fundamentals. Like, even with analytics, I hope that people aren't just using analytics now and they don't need to go talk with customers. And so I think there are products that even we build that could fail our customers or get in the way because you feel like you're checking off the box and you're doing the role right, and yet you're missing out on the most profound sets of insights. And then I think, going back to what I was saying about missing, I still feel like we have not figured out, like in the kind of the world of tools and process, the way to kind of, as I described earlier, taking all these different feedbacks and channels and qualitative inputs as a way to, like, bring it into a place that can align it with some quant and some other kind of tools. I still feel like I see so many people creating new spreadsheets and new processes about how to connect those dots, and almost spending more time trying to figure that out, that process, than actually just really focusing on solving the problem, and or tackling one thing they know is wrong, and so I just think there's some things that we haven't figured out in terms of tooling, and then there's some tools that are super beneficial on one hand, but then make us lazy and create shortcomings on the other hand.